Welcome to Learn and Love Music. I'm Duane Hulbert. Today we're going to look at a piece written by Alexander Scriabin, wonderful composer. And I had learned this piece for the Tchaikovsky competition in 1982. All competitors had to learn 6 different etudes. And this is the one that I chose. One of the things that I found very challenging about this piece is that it had a lot of jumps in it. But more important than the technical jumps is the beauty of the piece. And when you have a piece that's technically hard because of the jumps, you don't want the audience to hear that struggle that you're going through trying to get all the notes accurately with all the jumps. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to master the technique of these jumps in this wonderful piece. Before we get started, I want to encourage all of you to subscribe to our channel. We want to see you back again. And don't forget to check out our companion video where I'll be playing the entire work. So let's begin. Tip number 1, don't forget to breathe. This piece has perpetual motion. There are 8 notes going throughout the whole piece. I remember when I first started working on this, I thought, what makes it so hard are all the jumps. But what makes it easier, and actually easier for the listeners, is to breathe between phrases. I think when I first learned this piece, I thought this was the way it was supposed to go. He writes 72 beats per minute. I'm probably doing that. But what we want to do is we want to take those notes, those groups of notes, and make them musical. It comes about by breathing between the phrases. I'll talk you through this. Everything has to have breath in order to make it work. And it makes your jumps much more easy to play. And tip number 2, use the push-drop technique in order to get through big jumps. And what that means is that as you're playing these, you have to have an octave leap here. Push, drop. Push, drop. It's really hard if all you're doing is just push, 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 because your arms get tired and you get kind of tied up in knots. But this way gives your arms a break, and it allows the music to breathe, and your technique and your muscles to breathe too. So here I'll put it all together. I'll talk you through it. Push it up. So you see, the important part of this is being able to relax your muscles when you're dropping or pushing or making big leaps. And I find it does help to get over the notes, but more importantly, you cannot tighten up your muscles when you're doing those pushing exercises. It really has to be very relaxed. I remember my teacher, when I had techniques like this, working on them, she would sneak up behind me and she would try to put her hand behind my elbow, and if she ever felt that it was really, really tight, she knew that the sound wouldn't be very good. So it's really important when you do these kinds of big jumps, keep your arms, your elbows, all of this very relaxed. Drop, drop. So you're dropping with the weight of the arm. We're not tightening up the muscles. The muscles have to stay very supple especially when you have big jumps. And the Russians loved octave jumps. We know in the Tchaikovsky concerto there are lots of octave jumps, octave scales and all of that. But this is a technique that's really important for advanced pianists. Tip number 3, use a circular motion when you're negotiating these big octave leaps. This is about measure 39 on the last page. We have these wonderful jumps. Jump up, up, up. One of the things I've found is that when I'm working on a piece, I have to decide whether I want a passage to be in clockwise motion or counterclockwise motion. Sometimes it works either way, but you pick one that works the best for you. This one, I tried once to do it the opposite way, in other words, to do clockwise, but I found it to be a little bit harder. I like this motion a little bit better. It reminds me a little bit of playing a violin. I actually played the violin when I was younger, and I was a very bad violinist, but I remember the whole idea of a down bow stroke is very beautiful on a violin. And I found that that technique, that upward motion and the release, is something we can use on the piano as well, especially when we have these big jumps. Here's a passage on the last page of this etude. Shape it upward and then upward, upward, upward. Very important to get that going. If you wanted to try it the other way, you could go opposite of that and do it clockwise. Drop, push, drop, push, drop, push, drop, push. I don't like that one as much because it's a little bumpy when you get fast, but this one, it's going to be hard to get up to the top notes. But doing it the opposite way, what we really want to do this, we want to make sure that goes in that wonderful counterclockwise motion. Some of you might think that it would be easier just to go in and out on the keys because you can get around the black keys easier and you get to the notes easier. But the one thing that you don't want to do when you're working on a really hard octave passage is you don't want to pump iron. So this is like kind of like, reminds me of like a exercise bike or something like that. Your elbow has to stay stationary in order to work on speed. If it's slow, that's okay, but when you have speed, you really have to keep that elbow floating, and it's not big motions. It's just very gentle rotating of the elbow and of the arm as it follows the elbow. The motion should be very subtle. Small motions in a rotation, either clockwise or counterclockwise. So very important to not exaggerate that motion, because when you go faster, you won't be able to exaggerate. You won't be able to play quickly with a big motion. Subtle motions always work better. Tip number 4. In the middle part of the piece, Scriabin goes from eighth notes to triplets. Now with triplets, we have to negotiate the technique at the same speed, but with repeated notes. And what I find is that, especially when you have octaves in the repeated notes, you have to make sure that you use a little bit of wrist technique in order to do that. If your wrist is locked, you'll find that you won't be able to make the jumps. So really, you have to have a very supple wrist. A lot of times, when we work on repeated notes or very fast octave notes like that, it's important that we keep the wrist and the elbow very, very relaxed. And the other thing I think that helps the technique here is that Scriabin puts in accents. Whenever you have accents, you want to make sure that you have a down motion. It works a little bit better for sound. So what I do is this, drop, push. So when the accents appear, then we do drop, then we do push, push. So how we handle repeated notes or fast notes can either be a drop or a push. And how do we determine that? I always try both ways and see which way works the best for me. Sometimes you have to change the motion from clockwise to counterclockwise, just depending on what your elbow is doing. But remember, the most important part about fast double note technique, whether it's in octaves or thirds or any kind of a fast passage, you want to make sure that the wrist is supple and the elbow is supple as well. Never do we lock the wrist and the elbow. We always have to have those joints moving in order to play fast. Finally, tip number 5. In the middle part of the piece, he has a passage that's written with octaves, and it's marked fortissimo. This is the only place in the piece where we have longer phrases written, and the implication here would be that it's not choppy at all. It's very warm, rich, and legato in a way. You have to use the pedal in order to get this working for you, but the sound has to be rich and beautiful. So listen to this passage. Short phrase, long phrase. Then we're back to the fast stuff. But that little section really has to sort of shine like a beacon because it's so beautiful because of the legato touch that you need in that octave passage. And don't forget, you must use more pedal in this passage for it to work really well. I've just given you 5 tips on how to play this wonderful piece by Scriabin from Opus 8. Also, I have a bonus for all of you. I have also put on another shorter piece, a beautiful lyrical piece that was written later from Opus 42. Wonderful piece. So it's like an extra bonus. You should enjoy it. It's much different than this piece. This is more of a technical piece. This bonus piece is just beautiful and lyrical. I loved it so much that I had to share it with all of you. Thanks for watching Learn and Love Music. I'm Duane Hulbert. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on some works by Scriabin. And don't forget to subscribe. I want to see you back again. So we'll see you next time on Learn and Love Music.